want to order myself, I swear. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm selfish. I want to order myself, I swear. You don't need nobody else, I swear. I want to order myself because I'm selfish. Hello, class. My name is Kaylin Danielle Clausell, and I will be discussing Ralph Waldo Emerson, which we should all know a lot about this man right here. I want to order myself because I'm selfish. I want to order myself, I swear. You don't need nobody else. I want to order myself. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit background information about Ralph Waldo Emerson. The song that was playing was called Selfish by P&P Rock. And the only reason that I played that song is because of the title. Just kind of relating to how the Transcendentalists were during this time period. I'm not going to say that they were necessarily selfish, but very independent, so to speak. So in that retrospect, that's why I played the song. So just a little background information about Ralph Waldo Emerson. He was born in Boston, Massachusetts on May 25th in 1803. He passed away in 1882, so he lived, about a good 80 years, good lifetime. He is known as the founding father of the Transcendentalist movement. He did experience a lot of tragedy, but remained sane despite death all around him. His first wife, not his first wife, I think, he lost his first wife, yeah. He did lose his first wife, and then he remarried and lost his first child, which, for anyone, that would take a toll on a person. But for him, he was still very optimistic and still carried and held himself very high and had a strong faith. So, to know more about Ralph Waldo Emerson, I'm going to give you background information on the Transcendentalist movement because that's what he was the founding father of, Transcendentalism. So this was in the early 1800s. Their whole motto, their whole movement was everything happens for a reason. What is intuitive, based on one's feeling to be true. Nature is divine, and we must not interfere with it and leave it be as God has intended. Which kind of brings us to the three transcendentalist values. These are kind of like their whole message, their purpose behind, and what they kind of stood for. Their core values included individualism, idealism, and the divinity of nature. So I'm just going to give you a couple of definitions of those just to kind of squeeze you in just a little bit more so you can understand his whole being and what he stood for as a person, as a philosopher, as a poet. So individualism, meaning just independence, self-reliance, that played a big part into feminism with one of the other transcendentalist philosophers, Margaret Fuller. Very strong, but seem to be undermined by majority of the male society for the women. Women are strong, just not as strong as men was kind of, their push. But she was Margaret Fuller, very strong person, very self-reliant as well, very independent. So transcendentalism is really about what it says on this picture right here. Reliance on the self and the search for spiritual truth. Just getting closer to that spiritual side, finding the truth within yourself, knowing who you are, what you should be doing in life, your purpose. And so the next one is idealism. the practice of forming or pursuing ideas. So I'm not going to say that he wanted people to necessarily follow him. Emerson just kind of wanted people to be on a self-righteous path, like do things for them, do things for self, be able to rely on yourself. And the last is divinity of nature. They were non-believers of an organized religion, so they weren't church folks, but they still believed in a higher power and were still very spiritual and religious people. Once again, I did say he had a very strong faith. He just was not about, going into the so-called house of the Lord and really hearing the word from someone else's perspective, when I feel like, for himself, he could read it himself. He can read the book himself. He can learn for himself. He can experience things on his own. So going to church doesn't necessarily define, your religion. That's just, he didn't want to feel like he was following, someone. So then you have the Walden Pond, which was kind of his sanctuary. The writer, transcendentalist, and philosopher Henry David Thoreau lived on the shores of Walden Pond for about 2 years, and which was, he started doing that on the 4th of July in 1845. And during his stay, he kept a journal chronicling everything he witnessed and learned from nature, just learning the importance of it and how much joy and just closeness it can bring you to yourself. Nature is just so pure, and society is potent. That's why I feel like he was on the path of not focusing on what others are doing, but doing what's meant for you, doing what your purpose is, what you were born here for. Once again, which ties back into that divinity of that nature is divine, and we shouldn't interfere with that. Beautiful picture though. They said that it gets, a lot of, I think it's in Boston, Massachusetts as well. They said that this, they've kind of made it like a sacred ground almost, like you can go visit there and things like that as well. So go ahead and get selfish. I feel like this picture is, just kind of perfect, self-explanatory. But Self-Reliance was one of his most prominent works. He did have others, but this one was like top of the notch. It's kind of what brought you in and made you realize like what he stood for, what type of person he was. And so this explanation down here just kind of goes off of one of the sources that I got, just kind of explaining, what he was trying to get people to understand through this piece of work. He just advocates to his readers to avoid blindly following the paths of others, instead to trust and follow their own instincts and blaze their own path. Hope and optimism is the essence of self-reliance, and debt will rob them of opportunities and self-confidence. Don't consume yourself into so many things that, now it's like you feel like you have to, you owe someone, and it's like you really can't do anything because you feel like I have to pay this and pay this off before, I can start experiencing things. So I feel like that's why Walden Pond was kind of, their sanctuary, just to get away from society and hold on to the beauty of nature and the environment, and how important it is to attach yourself with that. Because before there was society, there was the skies, there was the stars, the sun, the breeze, water, the trees. So just very in tune with nature as well. And so I got this quote from the piece of work. There is a time in every man's education when he arrives at the conviction that envy is ignorance, that imitation is suicide, that he must take himself for better, for worse, as his portion, that though the wide universe is full of good, no kernel of nourishing corn can come to him, but though it's soul bestowed on that plot of ground which is given to him to till. And from this quote that I just get from this, it tells me to be me and only do what I feel is necessary for me. Never looking to the next man to see what I should be doing, Being envious and jealous of the next person will get me nowhere. And what is meant for me is meant for me, and what is for the next man is just that for him. Imitation is dead, because just because the next person does it doesn't mean it will play out the same for me. And plant your own seeds and watch how strong and big they grow when you nourish your own. Take the good and bad and use that to make a better you. And he just said, that envy is ignorance, that imitation is suicide. You're killing yourself trying to copy the next person and trying to do exactly what they're doing, when you have your own path. You have your own purpose. Everybody's purpose is not the same. So you need to nourish what you have. And because if you're so busy trying to imitate the next person, you're lacking on self. You're not nourishing your own. You're actually taken away from that. And so I also brought out another quote. This is the very beginning. And it starts off, "Man is his own star, and the soul that can render an honest and a perfect man commands all light, all influence, all fate. Nothing to him falls early or too late. Our acts, our angels are, or good or ill, are fatal shadows that walk by us still. Cast the bantling on the rocks, suckle him with the she-wolf's teeth, wintered with the hawk and fox, power and speed be hands and feet." And from this, just never conform into what society thinks you should be, or do what everyone else is doing. Have your own voice. Your religion was a big part of a transcendentalist lifestyle, but they did it their own way. Didn't need to attend church to have reason or feel closer to that higher power. But your faith determined that, not someone else telling you how to live a so-called righteous life. You are your own star, and feed your soul with life by being honest and allowing fate to take a hand on this wheel in life. Remember, nature is divine, and we must not interfere with what God has in store for us. And this was just, kind of a saying. I feel like that he probably said a lot. It's not quoted, but, people are truly their best when they are self-reliant and independent. And that's just kind of what he stood for, in independence, being you, being strong, being spiritually connected to your soul, to yourself, to nature, and just growing and trying to get others to do the same, find you a sanctuary and don't complain, and just, grow from that and use that to the best of your ability. And this right here is the end of my project, my presentation, and I hope you have learned a lot about Ralph Waldo Emerson.